Hey guys, this is Jennifer from the Shooter's Mindset. We are live with episode 374. We have our co-host Greg Cannon here tonight. How's it going?
Hey everyone.
And our guests of the hour tonight, I'm very excited. I always love having these guys on because the knowledge bombs that get dropped, and I feel like a lot of people see it and they get excited. So our guests of the hour tonight are Bryan Litz and Mitch Fitzpatrick. How's it going?
Going good today. How's it going with you?
Going good. I can't complain. If I did, nobody'd care. So
Yep, no complaints in my world either.
that's right. So we'll go ahead and get started. For anybody that doesn't know of you, which I think most people that are shooting anything long range kind of know about you, but for anybody that maybe is unfamiliar with you or kind of how you came to be where you are, Bryan, can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are in shooting and the world of ballistics and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, sure. So I'll breeze through the beginning part because I think it's a common story. Like who among us didn't shoot pellet rifles as a kid and slingshots and bow and arrows, everything I could get my hands on. I was, shooting in my yard. And, when I got older, my dad would take me shooting. And, when I was in high school is when I first shot my first 1,000-yard. It was a bench rest competition in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Shot bench rest 1,000 yards, then shot prone 1,000 yards. And my first year shooting at Camp Perry, that was kind of a big deal for me. That was my senior year of high school. I went to college and kind of shooting sort of took a back burner at that time because, who's got time for that when, or money for that. So I still shot a couple matches a year through college, but then, after college, I got a job with the Air Force as a contractor, doing modeling and simulation for threat air weapons, so air-to-air missiles. And I did that for 6 years, and that career actually gave me the chance to get back into shooting a little bit. Started traveling and shooting some big matches. And that's the time that I was also getting really active in the forums, the internet forums, and starting to write articles, getting published in Precision Shooting Magazine. So that was kind of I'd say the genesis of my involvement in the shooting community as, an eventual author. And so I worked in that position for 6 years and started getting approached by bullet companies in the industry to come to work for them as a ballistician designing bullets. Took a job with Berger Bullets in 2009, which is also the same year that I published the first edition of Applied Ballistics for Long Range Shooting. And that book's in its third edition now, and of course there's a bunch of other books. But from 2009, when I left the Air Force and started working for Berger Bullets and opened my company Applied Ballistics, that's kind of where everything that people know today as Applied Ballistics started in that 2009 timeframe. It's been a whirlwind the last, I guess, 13 years. Shot a lot of different disciplines and on different continents, and including a lot of Palma shooting and F class as far as formal competition. Haven't shot much PRS. One or two local matches. Went into ELR mostly the last few years, and been doing a lot of research in the lab and trying to through books and other means get what we're working on out into the shooting community. So that's kind of my background. Mitch was there for a lot of it. The last when did we meet, Mitch? Well, I guess it's your turn. Why don't you tell your own story?
Yeah, so we actually met in 2012 at a F-class match at Camp Grayling, Michigan. And so my story starts slightly before that, not very long before that. But when I was early in high school, I decided I kind of got interested in long range shooting and wanted to pursue it. I think I originally got the idea from reading some books about Carlos Hathcock, and it talked about like the Wimbledon Cup and Palma shooting and all that. And I was like, that sounds really cool. And as I started researching it, I saw there was a type of shooting called F class, which was similar, but you got to use a bipod and a scope and all that. And honestly, that sounded even cooler. So I decided to go down that path. And then I found that there was a match there locally that I went to, and that's the one that Bryan was at that match. That's where I first ran into him. But I actually got started in it mostly through gunsmithing, actually, because I definitely didn't have the funding at the time to put together a competitive rifle. But I did have access to mills and lathes and all that fun stuff. And so obviously with the help of my dad and some uncles, we like rebarreled a Savage rifle to start, and that one shot really well. And I shot one match with that, and that was in late 2012. And then between the 2012-2013 season, I ended up like designing an action from scratch. I bought a bolt, but the whole receiver and everything, I designed it from scratch on CAD, actually in a CAD class I had in high school. And machined it all out on the mill, manual mill, not even CNC, and put the rifle together. It shot super well, and just shot a ton of matches in 2013. Started shooting with the Michigan F-class team that Bryan was the coach on. And so that's where Bryan and I really got to know each other. And so, you know, I was the 16-year-old kid who built his rifle from scratch, and I was very serious about long range shooting. And Bryan was like, you might be valuable to kind of take under my wing. So started working with Bryan, interning with Applied Ballistics, and been interning there ever since, all the way up through college. And now the last couple of years been full-time since I graduated college.
So basically, Bryan, you're a rocket scientist.
I mean, I didn't have any classes called rocket scientist class, but yeah, aerospace engineering is what I went to school for at Penn State. And that was Mitch's degree too, as well as mechanical engineering.
Yep.
I think they call it aeronautical engineering at Michigan Tech.
So that's actually what they called it when I started. But by the time I graduated, what I ended up doing is I have my major is in mechanical engineering and my minor is in aerospace.
Yeah.
Y'all are both rocket scientists.
Slightly.
I feel very not smart now.
No, there's lots of stuff from my first job with the Air Force that applies here. You know, it was modeling and simulation work, not hands-on work with the missiles. But you know, modeling and simulation, that's what ballistics programs are. You know, you're making a model of the bullet, you have a model of the atmosphere, and you simulate that with the equations of motion. And it's in some ways it's easier than modeling missiles because, you know, there's no guidance and control. There's no thrust. You know, there's far fewer variables with small arms projectiles. But what makes it more difficult is there's no guidance. And so any minor error in what we call initial conditions and the bullet goes astray, doesn't hit the target. And so that's the challenge of modeling ballistic fire solutions, is to understand the initial conditions well enough to calculate a fire solution that is truly accurate, that will, you know, let the bullet fall onto the target after flying maybe thousands of yards and dropping hundreds of feet. And, you know, the wind, as we all know, the wind is the big nemesis, mostly because it's not deterministic. You know, if you were able to measure the wind and or if the wind were consistent, it would not be difficult to hit targets in the wind. It's only difficult because the shit changes all the time.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say they'd rather shoot in 15 mile per hour consistent wind than anything switchy or changing up.
Mm-hmm.
My bullet usually goes astray because of what I do, not.
Yeah, there's lots of, that's kind of one of the things I enjoy about shooting is there's so many aspects of it that, you know, and some people you'll see will pigeonhole into one thing or another. Like some guys really like to hand load, so they spend hours and hours at the loading bench. Some guys only like to shoot, so they don't give a shit if it's factory loaded ammo or what, they just want to be out shooting. You know, there's some parts that just aren't fun, but if you really want to be good at it and be a well-rounded marksman, you have to do that work as well as the fun stuff.
That's very true. So can you tell us, so we're going to have a big announcement on this show, but we're going to do like everyone else and drag it on and have some commercial breaks first to make everybody squirm and wonder what it is. So big announcement. You have to hang on and watch for like 3 minutes. So Facebook will log it as a watch. No, I'm just kidding. But there is going to be a big announcement in a few minutes. But first, I want you to kind of explain. Some of our audience may not be long range shooters. They might be, USPSA shooters that don't really get into the long range stuff. So they may not have such a need for applied ballistics like we all do. So can you just kind of explain a little bit to our viewers what applied ballistic actually does, what it is, what all services you provide?
Right. So primarily, Mitch brought this up in a discussion we had earlier, I guess it was late last week. In essence, we're an information company. The initial products that we put out were books. We had several books, and then we got into software, the software that you're familiar with in a Kestrel and the Applied Ballistics app. It's been integrated in a lot of different electro-optics now, rangefinders, a bunch of different manufacturers of rangefinders. So we supply information and software that is used to generate information and data to support calculations. So it's really all about data and information that we work to supply, and that empowers and enables devices to work correctly and usefully, and it also empowers shooters to learn what they need to know and understand about hitting targets. So fundamentally, we're an information company. Now, the different products and ways that we interact is obviously the books, the software, government contracting in recent years. We've done a few R&D projects involving extreme range rifle systems and highly consistent ammunition. And so we have a research facility, and the product of that is information, and the essence of the information that we provide is all to be useful specifically in the context of external ballistics. Now, you can't really separate the branches of ballistics entirely. You go from internal, external to terminal in the blink of an eye, and there's lots of interactions. And so, there's no avoiding internal ballistics, especially when you're doing like ammunition development. But what we really specialize in is the external, from when the bullet comes out of the muzzle until it hits something. That flight and understanding it and knowing how to calculate an accurate fire solution to hit a target, that's primarily where we focus. We are looking to expand into those other areas more in the future, getting more equipment and instrumentation to look closer at internal ballistics, and looking at some penetration studies on the terminal ballistic side. But for up until this point, we've been primarily focused on information supporting external ballistic applications.
Yeah, and one quick addition I have to that is essentially all the information that we produce, because that's our product, is all directly from live fire testing. So like everything we do either starts or ends with a lot of live fire testing in the lab, at various ranges if we need further distances, and all that. So that's really the basis of where our information comes from.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's it's common to speculate about cause and effect and why things happen. We try to do as little speculation as possible, and the way to do that is to get close to the source. If we're supplying information, it behooves us to get as close to the source as possible. And when we smell gunpowder, we're nowhere near the source. You're collecting data, and a lot of times we make reports and everything and say this is what happened, and you can sit around with people all day long and discuss why it happened. Everybody might have a different idea about why it happened, but nobody questions what happened. Like, this is the truth of what happens when you do this. And we take it one step at a time to discover the true causal relations and know why. But that's a good point, Mitch, that everything starts with live fire. I mean, sometimes we throw theories around, but we don't publish things based on theories that haven't been tested.
Yep.
I'll admit that we've kind of rationalized our involvement in competitions to some degree, because it allows us to go into the field and put our science to the test, learn where there's gaps, and develop solutions for those. And it's a very practical way to evolve the goals of the company, is to get out there with the people who use this stuff and figure out what the problems are. And that steered our research for many years.
That's awesome. I don't know if y'all start doing different ballistics, and I don't know that y'all can get any cooler. Like, it's going to be like really crazy if y'all get any cooler. I already think like applied ballistics is like my favorite thing in shooting, because it's fascinating to me. I love the science of it. And I have a scientific brain. So to me, it's so cool. All of the different things and the classes that y'all do and that Emil does, and the custom drag models that y'all do are just fascinating to me. How much one variable can affect the flight and change it so much is just amazing. Mm-hmm. So
let's say about the only thing cooler you guys could do is if you would do all that cool sciencey stuff you do on my gun.
I don't know. And all of the fruit that you're blowing up on Instagram, it's pretty legit. Like, I'll sit there and just watch them and rewind. Like, it's so cool.
Did you see the fly?
The fly?
Yes.
The fly on the chocolate bunny.
On the chocolate bunny.
You shot a fly? There's a fly in my office today that if I'd had my gun, I would have shot it. That's pretty cool.
But yeah, I mean, anyone who shoots, if you're a shooter and you get access to a high-speed camera, what are you going to do?
I'm going to wait until a fly lands on a chocolate bunny.
Exactly.
Or if you're going to take time to do that.
Yep.
And so if you guys are listening and are wondering where these awesome videos are on Facebook and Instagram, they're at.
Oh, they're shared by the Applied Ballistics Facebook page, and also the Bryan Litz Ballistics Facebook page, and the counterparts on Instagram. So they're coming out on 4 channels.
They also make their way to our YouTube channel too.
Yeah, they all end up there.
Let me tell you, they're really cool. Like a watermelon blowing up in slow motion from a bullet, pear, apple. I can't even remember what all else you've done. It's so cool though.
Yeah, we watch them again and again. I mean, when you watch it in real time, I mean, everyone knows what it looks like in real time. It's like, pow, everything, it just vanishes. Whatever it is just gone, like abracadabra. But when you watch it, like, we can slow that video down to painstakingly slow, like so slow you get bored of watching it, because it's exploding like this. And you're like, come on, just fast forward already.
Yep.
So we got to kind of play with the speeds a little to make it slow enough that you really see everything that's happening, but fast enough that you're not late for dinner.
Yeah.
It's super cool. So Greg, there's a ton of lives. You want to hit some of those?
Yeah, I was just seeing those questions.
Yeah, we do have a ton of live, and we're going to try and do our best to ask all of these. If I miss you, I'm very sorry, but I'm trying my best.
This is you. It's all his fault.
Yep. Ted asked if you guys have ever tested bullets cold welding to brass cases during storage, and the effects of extreme spread and standard deviation on group size. And is this even a real thing?
I don't know that I've ever let ammo sit that long without shooting it.
Yeah, I don't think we've done a specific test on that. It's certainly something we could do, but like Bryan said, it's a tough test, because you have to, load ammo, and you have to set it aside such that you're going to revisit some of it 3 months later, some of it 6 months later, some of it a year later, 2 years later. Like how long are you going to run that test? But as far as like the cold welding of metals in contact, it's certainly possible in certain situations. But if I don't want to just generalize here, but if you have any sort of lube in there at all, you're probably not going to see an issue from that. If you have an issue, it's either from humidity soaking or something else.
So Ted asked if ballistic programs run different equations for G1 versus G7 BCs, or do they are there two separate programs in there, or is it one program that just uses both constants?
It's just one
Programs.
program, and the G1 and G7 standards are just, there's one curve for G1 and one curve for G7. It's similar to when you run a CDM for your bullet. That CDM is just a drag curve, but it's a drag curve specific to your bullet. And a ballistic coefficient is referencing the drag curve of a standard. So all the equations are the same. It's just referencing a different pattern of drag is the only thing that's different with G1 to G7. Like G1 and G7, that's two different curves, but you can reference any bullet to them with some amount of error. CDMs, there's hundreds and hundreds of CDMs. And so there's not hundreds of different versions of the calculator. There's just one version of the calculator that will call either the G1, G7, or a custom curve to calculate drag.
And just a quick addition to that, because it's, I think it's when we use the term drag curve, I think for a lot of people, they don't necessarily understand what that means in the context of a ballistic solver. And really what we're talking about is just a table of values. It's a table of Mach and CD values that are in the solver. And with a G7 or a G1, you have a table for each one of those. And when you're using a BC, you're essentially just kind of scaling those numbers up and down in the table, versus with the CDM where there's a unique table for each one. But the table format itself is the same regardless, so the equations are the same.
You're muted.
Yep. We'll do like one or two more and then get back. Ardvin asks if there's value in sorting bullets by overall length or ogive to boat tail sorting. Will this result in better results past 800 yards?
Why don't you go first this time, Mitch?
All right. So in testing that we've done, actually, this was really initiated by another AB employee. I believe this kind of started with Al Barnhart. But some testing that he conducted on this subject is he measured like everything you can measure about a bullet. I think it was like 200 bullets. Bryan might know the exact number, but he measured everything you can imagine, put it all in a Excel spreadsheet essentially, and then went and shot all of them. And then you've got, your BC data on all of them. And then he just correlated what measurements corresponded to, like high or low BC variation, things like that. And essentially the answer from all of that was sorting by just the overall length of the bullet, tip to base. Doing that gave you the most consistent BCs that you could be going for. Now, as far as, if you're talking groups, if you're trying to measure like, base to ogive for groups, that's kind of a separate thing. And that's really hard to isolate in a large scale test. And it's not something that we've seen any relevance to, but for sure, when it comes to consistency of BC, just overall length of the bullet.
Yeah, see, now I get to elaborate on your answer. So it may seem strange that overall length would have an effect on BC. Like, what is it about the overall length that would change drag? In particular, it's the MEPLA diameter, the diameter of the tip. And the tip diameter has a substantial effect on drag in BC for obvious reasons. A blunter tip makes more drag than a smaller tip. And it so happens that the tip diameter of a bullet correlates to its overall length. So the thing you really want to know, the MEPLA diameter, it's hard to measure. If you've ever tried to measure the tip diameter of a hollow point bullet, you really can't do it very repeatably because it's jagged and irregular, but you can measure the overall length decisively. And it turns out like all of the bullets with blunter noses tend to be your shorter bullets, and the bullets with pointier tips are always longer. So if you sort by overall length, you're actually sorting by MEPLA diameter as well. And it's that MEPLA diameter that directly affects drag and BC. But yeah, that's what I do. If I'm going to sort bullets for BC consistency, I measure by overall length and sort into maybe 3 bins. depending on how close they are. You know, if there's, and here's the weird thing about shooters and sorting things. If I give a shooter a box of bullets and there's 20 thousandths variation in the overall length, he will break them into 5 bins of 4 thousandths each. If I give a shooter a box of bullets that only has 5,000 spread, right, that would have all been 1 bin. He will break them into 5 bins of 1,000th each. Like, that's just what shooters do. And, but in like, to have some context on it, you know, if anything within a range of like 5 thou variation, plus or minus 2 or 3 thou, those are pretty much going to be the same. You know, it's the ones that are 10 thou different, 15 thou from each other that you're going to really start to see some outliers in BC. And you'd want to sort them into bins of about 5 thou overall length.
Yep.
I'm amazed that men cannot sort laundry, but they can sort bullets down to like 100 thou.
If you put numbers on the laundry, that would probably help.
You think, instead of colors? So we're gonna have a big live announcement in a minute, but why don't we do one more live, Greg?
All right. Come on, computer, scroll up. Ooh, here's a good one that I like. Will y'all be diving deeper into more rimfire and twist rates, faster twist rates at distance?
Yeah, the answer is yes. We have done work on that in the past. We did a test that was published in Modern Advancements Volume 2, where we shot 95 different rimfire types out of 5 different barrels of various length and twist to study muzzle velocity and the SD of muzzle velocity, as well as BC and the SD of BC, and how the length and twist of the barrels affected those things. Now, I guess it's a flaw of that test in retrospect is that it was all done at 100 yards. There wasn't such a thing as ELR 22 back then. So we just, you know, we did it at 100. We have a new set of guns and Doppler radar now, and we're going to do a modern, you know, revised version of that test at longer distance to study the effects of twist rate on rimfire at distance.
Sounds like I might have to buy a different barrel sometime soon after I see all these results. I love the fact that you guys, like, you know, there's a bunch of us that are sitting around. I'm like, well, I got a Kestrel, a magneto speed, a ruler, and a piece of paper. Let me see what I can do. And you guys are like, yeah, we have a lab and Doppler radar. I'll do that experiment for you.
Yeah, it gets fun. It gets overwhelming sometimes. There's days I'll go to the lab for like one quick, simple thing. And before I know it, I'm neck deep in a project that's going to take 6 weeks. And I didn't even think of it before I walked in the door. And it's like, oh, there's nothing between me and this test right now. I could do this.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And Jennifer, we had another AB employee, Francis, answer your question about the laundry thing. He said it's because we're colorblind.
You're colorblind?
Francis can sort anything, man. You give that guy like 5 brand new white t-shirts out of the pack and he will put them in order. Somehow he'll find an order why this one's a little bit and this one's a little less, and he will explain and sort anything. He'll sort. It's done well.
I just want to come work at AB. I'll come pull the trigger for y'all. Right. I'll just shoot all of your things. That'd be so fun. So should we let everyone?
You might regret that. You might. We've gone through shooters.
Yes.
Wait, do you expect perfect technique? Because I might get yelled at if that's the case.
No, you just need to be able to shoot a 375 with a muzzle brake all day long, or a suppressor. But like I said, we can do a lot with the resources in our lab, and it's not uncommon for us to shoot from start till stop in a day. I mean, like 8 hours shooting a shooter on each of 2 guns, tracking with radar, tracking with shot marker. It's work. And I know it's hard to hear. You're like, I'll pull a trigger all day. maybe the first day, maybe the second day, but by the third day of nothing but getting kicked by a 375.
And they all
You'll
have
have
to be
enough.
very precise shots too. Like you're actually trying to test precision. So you're not just burning them down. I mean, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of precision shots in a day. And it's,
Yeah, I would think you would want to change your shooter out throughout the day so you don't have shooter fatigue,
Yep.
creeping in as a variable.
Well,
yeah.
changing shooters is a variable.
Well, that's true. But so is if that shooter loses their technique because they're tired. So
Yeah.
now you understand the problem of large scale testing.
Yeah, very well said.
so difficult. So should we tell everyone the big announcement now, or should we drag it on longer?
I'm ready. I hate having things dragged out.
All right,
Like,
let's let them know the big
need to
announcement.
release.
So y'all tell us what it is.
All right, so we are launching the Science of Accuracy Academy, which is a website that hosts a number of different media formats for the information that we are putting out, starting with the podcast. Right now it's got, I think, almost 30 podcast episodes. It's live now. You can go to it and check it out while you're listening. It's thescienceofaccuracy.com. And right now it's just podcasts. We've got plans to stream video from there. Starting with our DVD content. This is in part sort of a modernization or adaptation project because, what do we have? We have books. Okay, some people still read books. We have DVDs. Nobody has a DVD player. And we did seminars. COVID killed that. We haven't done a seminar in over 2 years. And so we've got all this information and sort of dated ways of disseminating it. And so we thought, hey, if we put this we can put this on the internet. That's where everything's going. That's the road that's paved for this kind of thing. And so that's what we did. We built this website. It's a subscription-based site. You can obviously go to it and you can listen to samples of every one of the podcasts and see what they're about, read the description, so you know what's all there. And a lot of the podcasts are myself and Mitch or Francis talking about the content in the books, actually. So we'll sit down for half an hour to an hour and just go through a chapter and discuss, more like behind the scenes of when the testing was done, provide more context, talk about things that went wrong, things that, don't really have a place in a technical book, but are of interest to shooters who may be thinking about doing their own tests. And we talk about that, and also a lot that we have learned since doing those tests. Some of that stuff's been published for 5 or 6 years, and we've learned more since then. So we talk about all that. And, that's sort of the formal type of podcast, but we also have, there's a lot of informal stuff too, sitting around the fire, drinking beer, talking with Chad and Francis about winning the AG Cup. That's, I think, like I was saying earlier, to be a good marksman, you have to be well-rounded. And that means not just the hand loading, not just the ballistics, but, the blood, sweat, and tears. If you want to win competition, you have to understand mental management and all of those kind of factors as well. So we're trying to make it a sort of one-stop place for all of the information that you need to hit targets. Obviously it's heavily focused on ballistics because that's what we do. And honestly, that's one of the least well understood aspects of hitting targets at long range is the ballistics and fire solution side. But also everything else that goes into it, what are the good hotels to stay in an area so that you get a good night's sleep? There, nothing is off the table. And so we're starting with this podcast, and we hope in a month or two to be hosting some videos, starting with our DVD content broken up into streaming segments, and then some new training videos, and eventually, like if this works out and is sustainable, we are going to do a lot of projects in the lab, like in response to what the subscribers are asking for. Instead of populating it. Initially, we're populating it with discussions and presentations of work that we have already published over the years in books. But going forward, this is going to be our outlet for all new content coming out in the future, if it works well. So, books become podcasts. seminars become Zoom meetings that we can do online. And, basically all of the information that we're supplying as an information company, this is the modern outlet for it. So in a nutshell, the best as I can do, that's the big announcement.
That's awesome. So many people these days don't sit down with a book anymore, just because we've all gotten so, we need more. We need a video. We need interaction. We need, the book read to us. I mean, audiobooks are huge now. So I think that's awesome that you're doing that, as well as bringing in some of the background of, how y'all did the tests. Like, that would be fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of things. I may have been listening to these podcasts today, and this is a random thing that I noticed. I was trying to listen to another podcast that was on an internet platform and not a specific app. And it just, every time the phone went to sleep, every time a text message came through, it didn't work. But whoever did that technical side of things, you just hit play and it's just like you have an app, or have, it's playing through your podcast. So it's a very high quality, well thought out platform. You hit play and set it on your desk, and it plays through your ears all day, and call comes in, it goes right back over to it. So it's not a glitchy, halfway thought out process. It was well tested, well designed, and it works very, very well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure the developers will like to hear that. You guys know Betsy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Betsy, yeah, she was the main person helping us with the website design. She works with someone named Lori. Sorry, I don't know Lori's last name, but we put a lot of thought into that aspect of it, because in the beginning we were, just considering everything like, do we want to go on Spotify, which is a very mature podcast hosting software that will do it all right by default, or do we want to kind of do it a little more risky and go to like build our own website that plays these files and streams them from our a server that we have aside from Spotify. And for many reasons, flexibility probably being the biggest reason we wanted it on a website that we controlled. Another reason is, those other platforms make me kind of nervous. I know a number of people who have had their Facebook pages they lose access to them for no reason. And I don't know about Spotify, but I know it's a platform that we don't control. And so having all of this stuff, I mean, when you make a valuable investment like we have in this academy, and that we plan to continue doing, I don't want to have to worry about Mark Zuckerberg or whoever owns Spotify just deciding that they don't want to see guns on there anymore. And so it's sort of a safety thing that is their security thing that we built our own website out. And it did take a lot of fundamental work to get those things to work well, but I'm glad you noticed, and I'm glad that it's coming through loud and clear.
Yeah, it seems to work. My work doesn't like it for some reason, but government contractor computer networks and stuff, those are never easy to deal with. But
turn off the work Wi-Fi, man.
Yeah, it works well on every other platform I've tried to access it from. So we kind of went over this a little bit, but right now on the podcast, you guys have kind of 3 different categories we could filter it by. So you have the fireside chats, which is kind of similar to this, where we're just sitting here chatting. We're kind of talking about something specific here, but I know you got a bunch of content up with Chad and Francis, and a couple other people of just kind of chit chatting, and I can't wait to listen to that, because like that's the 2 groups of like the 2 smartest people I know talking together for the 4 smartest people I know, and that's got to be good. I saw you guys did some in the field match podcasts where you're out at the match and talking to people and seeing how it's going. But then my favorite is the in the lab. I listened to that because I haven't read all of the books. I've started reading the books, and it's just finding time to sit down and read a book and then digest it all. It doesn't work well for me. I've never been the kid in school to be like, oh, I'm going to get an A on this test, I'm going to read this book. That never worked for me. I had to do it and figure it out on my own. Like, I learn more from having a problem and an answer and figuring out the stuff in between than to read the book 9 times. But this is kind of like you read it and you're like, I think I get it. And then you guys go back over and it's literally like, this is chapter 4 of the book. This is what we talked about. And, you start talking and, you forget you're talking about a book and you're like, yeah, we're on page 7 now. And you see that over there. So it's a really good supplement for those books as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, exactly to your point, that's kind of where this originated from, is because like you are like most people in that way, like sitting down, reading books. It's kind of going to the wayside. And even like for myself included, where I'm absorbing this type of information is when I'm driving, kind of like what Bryan had mentioned earlier. So putting it into this format just makes it way more accessible to people who want to know the information, and people who want to read the books but just know that's not something they're going to do.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of books, wow, there's still a whole bunch of people paying attention. You guys really want to listen to this now. I'm sure all of you are going to go out and subscribe to this. And, we're talking about how we're kind of doing like read along. And so in order to get the full benefit of this service, you got to have these books. And we'll kind of go over here. It's a great accessory for your reloading bench. It matches the Dillon presses perfectly. And there is more knowledge than you can ever imagine inside of those books. So we're going to give one of y'all the complete AB media set, I think is what they call it. It's basically every book you'll ever need to know anything about ballistics ever. It's like everything. All you have to do to be registered to win this is to hit the share button on this live stream right now. And anytime if you're watching this throughout the week, just hit share and you'll be automatically entered to win. And what we'll do is next week, we'll go through, we'll click the button that says how many people shared this and get the list of them. And then we'll do a random number generator. And one of you guys is going to win this huge set of books that I think is worth like almost $400, isn't it?
I didn't think it was that much. I thought it was
$300. I don't know. It is college
I think it's
textbook.
like 275 is the number that's popping into my head for the media bundle is what we call it.
So, and all you have to do to be entered to win is hit share. So y'all should do it. And hopefully one of you guys gets to walk away with this awesome set of books.
How do you pick the winner?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, and you know how you can hit and see who shared your post?
Yeah.
I'm going to go click on that and go from top to bottom, count how many it is. And
we're going to pick whoever has commented the most in the last year.
No, that's going to be Prentice Wink. Prentice doesn't know how to read. He won't know what to do with them. But we're just going to use a random number generator to choose randomly which one of our shares wins the books. Cool. And Amanda came in, it is $279 for this whole set of books.
I was close.
You were real close. You were a lot closer than I was. You guys
like
are a lot.
All of these rocket scientists' brains on paper.
Well, that's actually mostly what AB pays me for, is for remembering things.
Fair, pretty fair. So
the occasional trigger.
Yes.
And driving the truck.
Yes.
Not getting the truck stuck in the mud.
Or yeah, I don't give a shit if he gets it stuck, just so he gets it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Greg, do you have any more lives?
Oh, there's a lot of lives. Let's pick back up where we were last. What's a realistic expectation for BC degradation using the same bullet throughout the life of the barrel?
2%.
3%.
2.
I
mean, it's not exact. I mean, that's an expensive test to do. I mean, we have worn out a lot of barrels, but in order to answer that question, you've got to wear the barrel out with the same lot of bullets that you started with, so that you don't introduce, lot variation in there. And the test that I remember specifically was on 300 Norma, and we were shooting 215s, and we put 1,000 rounds on each of 3 different barrels. And the point was to run 3 different powders for the life of the barrel and see how those, I mean, everything else the same, and see what difference just the powder made on the barrel's life cycle. And I think all three of those barrels, and we had a huge lot of bullets to do this with, I think all three of those barrels ended with BCs about 2% lower than what they started. And it was a gradual over 1,000. The test went to 1,000 rounds. The barrels weren't shot out yet, but it was only meant to go 1,000 rounds. And in 1,000 rounds, the bullets were 2% lower BC at the end. So, I mean, that really only can help you if you are shooting the same lot of bullets for the whole barrel life. If you switch bullet lots, which most people do, most shooters don't have like 1,000 or 2,000 bullets to wear out a barrel. Some do, like serious competitors that know what they're going to use all year. I think it's a really good idea to get a lot of components of the, similar lot. And in that case, you can, expect to see about 2% degradation. But if you're switching lots, you might end the barrel with higher BC bullets than you started because of lot variation.
So
Yeah.
kind of along those lines, someone is asking about whenever y'all do a CDM for them, a drag model that's custom to their gun, is that CDM only for that particular powder, brass, primer, bullet combo, or just for the bullet shot through the barrel? So basically, if they're always using 105 hybrids, can they continue to use 105 hybrids, but change the charge weight or change the brass or change the primers? As long as that bullet stays consistent, will they continue to have the same BC they get from the AB custom drag model?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's mostly the way I normally describe it is it's for, obviously that specific bullet, your specific lot of bullets, and your barrel. Like those other things don't really affect your BC. It's really the barrel bullet relationship. And so, I mean, obviously you're using more or less the same barrel. It does a question that comes up because, if you get a PDM and then 400 rounds later, you change your barrel, guys are like, okay, so is my PDM still valid? And the answer is maybe. It depends. We can't really say because we haven't tested that barrel. But barrel and bullet / specific bullet lot. Obviously, barring, if you were using brass that you had like a ridiculous neck tension and you were deforming the bullet when seating them, that's a totally different thing that you could argue is kind of related, but no, it's just barrel and bullet.
Yeah, the valuable thing that you're getting out of that PDM is the drag of the bullet. It's also going to tell you your average velocity during that string, but the velocity could change at any point. I mean, through temperature, round count, there's lots of reasons your muzzle velocity could change different from when you shot your PDM, but that drag model itself, as long as you're on that lot of bullets in that barrel, it's going to be what it is. That's what you're getting. That's the value of what you're getting. Now, to put it in perspective, we say we don't know exactly what it is unless we test it, which is true. But the variation that we're looking in, the window is very minor. Like take 105 hybrids, for example. We have tested at this point over 100 105 hybrids at matches. And we have, so the CDM that's in our library is the average of all of those. And what we find is that any given shooter, the vast majority of shooters that come to us for PDMs are within plus or minus 1% of that average. Occasionally, a guy will be like as much as 2% difference, but that's not very common. And it's extremely rare to be more than 2% different from that average. And so when we say we don't know what it'll be unless we test it, we don't know within plus or minus a couple percent for the most part. And so like if you get a PDM and then you change lots of bullets or you change your barrel and you're like, well, I don't know that this PDM is valid anymore. But at that point, you can default back to the general CDM that's in the library that's the average of everything. And you'll know that you're going right down the middle of what that bullet typically does.
So those are two acronyms that I know we've said a bunch during this podcast. What is a CDM and what is a PDM?
Go ahead, Mitch.
All right. So a CDM is a custom drag model, and that was a phrase that was coined, when we first started deviating from G1 and G7, with custom meaning, custom to a specific bullet. And then with the the onset of our ability to do essentially custom drag models for individual people, individual rifles combinations, and be able to support all that through our database with the software. We obviously had to differentiate that from just a normal CDM, so we called that a PDM, which stands for a personalized drag model, or a personal drag model.
Gotcha. So like if I bust out my Kestrel and I got my box of Burger 105s, I go down to Burger 105s and that's all I got to do. And
yep,
then I have my drag model for that. But then the PDM, that sounds like something that, only the top most serious shooters that, have tens of thousands of dollars to pay for something fancy like this would have, right?
Nope. Really, the barrier of entry to getting one is coming to a match that we're at. You come to the match, we're typically there the day before. It's like the sight-in day, and it's a free service for all the shooters shooting the match. And they can, they come see us, they get checked in, that puts them in line. We try to work through everyone as quickly as we can, and you lay down, you shoot your 10 shots, and we process the data and get it pushed to the library, and it's all really straightforward, easy to do, but it's free to the shooters. Like I said, your only cost is showing up and supporting a match.
It was so hard to do it. Whenever I did it, it's not really hard, y'all. It's easy. But when you get up there, they're like, okay, there's a target out there at about 700 yards, but try to not really hit it.
Oh, I'm good at that.
They were like, aim near it. We want you to get near it, but don't hit it because it affects it, I think. And it was just so funny. I was like, okay, don't hit the target, but your eyes want to put, you want to hit it.
Yeah. So coincidentally, it's not so much that hitting the target is going to mess anything up. There's been a couple instances where it's like the match directors didn't necessarily want the target really shot up for whatever reason going into the match the next day. But the biggest problem that we have, and this isn't so much with PRS, is everyone, for those 10 shots, everyone wants to take their time and hit the target, when in reality, the goal is just to shoot 10 shots as quickly, not as quickly as the shooter can shoot them, but as quickly as we can, save the data and rearm the radar so that we can get through as many shooters as possible in a day. Because if everyone tried to break, every best shot and hit, every shot, it's potentially we could have some guys at the end of the day didn't get a PDM. So that's really what we're after there is speed, not accuracy. Accuracy of the shots on target.
Gotcha. Yeah, it really is a super awesome setup that you guys have, and it's as shooters we greatly appreciate you guys driving across the country, getting a couple of flat tires, and setting up all this super fancy lab equipment just for all of us that barely know how to use a Kestrel to use your, I don't even know if we're tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, I don't know, real expensive stuff to make us better shooters. And it really does work. I went and I did mine when I was RO in the gap grind, and didn't touch the gun for several months after that, or several months before that. And like the night before a match, I updated my Kestrel, and Ryan Hayes watching, I'm sure he's going to yell at me for waiting that long. And I was like, oh, let's use this drag model I've never used before. I went out to the range and we didn't have a range finder and there were no distances. I was like, hey, someone give me a distance of anything. They're like, oh, that's 1100 over there. All right. Dead center hit. I was like, okay, it works.
There you go.
Yeah. See, there's a perception about data and ballistic solvers that over the decades kind of got a bad rap, in the sense that, bullet data like BCs have really been through the ringer on credibility. They've been used as marketing tools. They've been referenced to the wrong standard. They've been, made up by people who never really measured them. And so the prevailing wisdom is you can't trust your data until you shoot it. And so whenever someone picks up an AB device and they pull a CDM out of the library and build a gun profile, they're like, well, this is a start, but until I shoot it, I really have no idea what's going to happen. Well, what you got to realize is that has been shot. Everything in that library has been shot live fire with radar, and you're getting a trued solution. You're getting an actual fire solution it wasn't just shot and tweaked in by somebody with a solar calculator. It was tracked with a Doppler radar, and that track is a closed loop with a solver. So we basically use the same a version of the same solver that predicts the trajectory to reverse engineer what the drag curve is. So when you put a prediction into your solver, it's going to predict exactly what the radar measured. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it isn't made up. It's everything in there is from live fire. And so a couple more things about the context of the mobile lab at events. At PRS events, it is a nice to have. It's nice to know exactly what your BC is, but honestly, you could win any PRS match having 1% error in your CDM. You know, so it's not really necessary in PRS, although it's nice. Everyone likes to be sure and to know. ELR is where I think the PDMs really have become necessary. I mean, a lot of shooters in the ELR community consider it like when for a moment we thought we weren't going to King of 2 Miles last year, guys were melting down. Like, how are we ever going to hit anything without our PDMs? And so it's become in the ELR community, if your BC or CDM is off 1%, those are clean misses on most targets. And so that's the only way to get it within that narrow of a boundary is to be on site with a radar measuring the bullets coming out of each individual's gun. Now that's getting to the nitty gritty part, but there's something else that happens when we go to events too. You know, of course, everyone comes with PDMs and they have super fine, accurate drag calculations, but they may have like sight height and zero height reversed in their solver, for example, or some other, maybe the bullet length isn't correct and they don't know it. And so every time there's a crosswind, there's aerodynamic jump bleeding into their elevation solution that isn't real. And it's those bugs that we're able to work out on site with the shooters and help. Like the PDM may only help you this much, but you could be making a gross error in your use of the solver that's putting you this far off target. And we kind of like try to address all those things while we're there. And I would say, as far as like bringing shooters closer to center, we have done way more of that through, you know, advising the proper use of the tools than we have by providing PDMs. But it's, you know, it's all good. And we come away with all the data too, that we can assess and analyze and aggregate as to like, what is the best way to represent this bullet. Now that we've tested it 100 times, we have a pretty good idea. So there's a lot that goes on. That mobile lab, traveling to competitions, gathering data off all these modern competitive firearms has been a real valuable, as an information company, that's a very exciting thing to be doing.
Mhm.
So I was going to say, like, I totally trust the data that you give me. But what I don't trust is that I got my sight height right, that I put in the wrong twist rate, that I, you know, something like that. More than likely something that I fat fingered would be what I'd check versus the distance. 2 lives I want to hit real quick. John Wade asked, does PDM change with the distance of the sample?
So in short, no. Because so obviously with a PDM or a CDM, we do need to extend the data beyond what it was exactly measured. So there's some extrapolation on the ends, because obviously if your sample starts at 3,000 feet per second and ends at, say, 1,200 feet per second, well, it's conceivable at some point you're going to have, maybe you're going to change your load and now you're shooting 3,100 feet per second. So you've got to have data there. And then it's conceivable you're going to shoot at a farther target where you're going to have, maybe it's a really far shot, you're going to have 900 feet per second. So you need data there. And those extrapolations are based on live fire testing we've done at more extreme velocity bands, so that we know for a given bullet the shape of the drag curve, and then using the actual measured data, we can append the proper shape, and so it's like an appending / extrapolating beyond what was actually measured with the proper shape curve, if that makes sense. Might be kind of confusing, but the idea is the shape of the curve is what's important, and then the shape of the curve is reference to the actual measured data, and that gives you very precise data at all velocity bands, even as you get outside of what was actually tested in those cases.
All I'm saying is my 3 semesters of calculus in college would have been a lot more fun if we would have been talking about this stuff.
I agree with you.
So we talked about cars a lot. We could literally hear Charlotte Motor Speedway from the school. So we had a lot of car questions. It was fun.
We did have a cool calculus problem about if you drank 1 beer per hour and like the curve of what your blood alcohol would do, metabolizing it at a certain rate. That was fun. But no, this would be much cooler to do calculus. What was the other live, Greg?
Michael asked if you could quickly explain sight height versus zero height.
Right. So sight height is how far above your bore center line your scope center line is. So that's, it's simply how high your scope is above your bore. And zero height is on the target. If you zero and suppose you're an inch high of your aim point, you can enter that into the ballistic solver and it'll account for that when you're shooting at other targets. One of the common uses for zero height is for when you have like a gun that you run a suppressor on sometimes and sometimes not, there's a zero shift there. So you can build that into your gun profile that says, instead of slipping your turrets every time you put the can on and off, you can just have a gun profile that's got a zero height that's 1.5 inches low or whatever it is, and use one profile for can on and one for can off, the only difference being that zero height. Another thing that zero height's used for is in the case of some extreme long range guns where, they put the tapered scope base on so that you zero at the bottom of your scope's adjustment. Well, sometimes they're so tapered that you cannot mechanically zero at 100 yards. The lowest you can go is like, say 10 inches above your aim point at 100 yards. That's as low as it'll go. And so you can put that into the ballistic solver and it'll account for it when you're shooting at any distance.
Yep.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if we have more.
So many lives there.
Yeah. One more and we'll get back to our show notes. Rob asked, what's the effective range of CDMs for the rimfire models? His DSF is about 0.95 at 300 yards. Is that reasonable?
Yeah. There's some, I'm really excited actually to do this study with rimfire with all the barreled actions. We've got Voodoo barreled actions from 1-in-6 to 1-in-16, I think in 2-inch increments. And I'm really eager to shoot those at distance to see what effect the different twist rate has, because up until now, it's not as well behaved as centerfire. And when I say not as well behaved, what I mean is I've shot PDMs with my rimfire in Georgia and came back to Michigan and shot a PDM with the same gun and same ammo, and it was different. And the biggest thing that was different was this environment, so the stability condition of the bullet. And so whether through environment or barrel twist, there are stability effects playing big time in rimfire. Think about it. That it's starting out subsonic. We know that when centerfire bullets slow to that speed, they become very hard to predict. Well, that's the entire flight of a 22 bullet. So we're going to learn a lot. I'm excited about it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, 0.95, that's a 5% drop scale factor at 300 yards. That's where we're at now. That stuff is not as predictable as centerfire yet.
Awesome. So we said the podcast was rolling out in phases, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's go into I guess, expand a little bit more upon what's going to be phase 2 of the Accuracy Academy, Science Accuracy Academy.
Yeah, so we're going to continue doing the podcast, hopefully with more diverse list of guests, people that win matches, hopefully people that run other ballistics labs, kind of compare notes and see, I guess there's really no limit to what type of conversations we want to take the podcast to. But in addition to that, we're going to build video content and a Zoom kind of class structure where similar to doing seminars. Seminars were it was great to get face to face with people and have live Q&A in a place, but my God, it's surrounded by a day of travel on either side, hotels, meals, rental vehicles, all flights, all that stuff, and it's just so cumbersome to get to a seminar for 2 days worth of presentations. And these days, like you were saying earlier, with as mature as Zoom has gotten during the pandemic, it's kind of like, it was shitty that things shut down for so long and people couldn't travel. But the silver lining, as a result, we have these reliable video conferencing tools now that is actually, there's a lot of stuff that is more conveniently and probably better done without all that expense and cumbersome travel. So Zoom classes is something else that we're going to do. I mentioned the video. Mitch, can you think of anything else we discussed for phase 2?
Yeah, I mean, like different types of training type things. Obviously, none of this stuff is like solid yet. Like it's all stuff we're in the planning stages on. And it's not all going to come out at one time. It's, we're going to be just kind of releasing it as we go and as we create things. And
it sounds like, we don't have a specific plan of exactly what it's going to be. Sort of the way that I do things like this is, you got to have a plan and meet a milestone, but at some point it's not wise to make a highly detailed plan without any further feedback. So we want to see how this rollout goes, like get some feedback, get some dialogue with the subscribers and see like, hey, what do you want to see? Because we're not going to strike off and do something just because we thought it would be cool if our subscribers want something else. So it's really, there's a lot of potential things we could do, but I think the answer to your question is we're going to let it be driven by the users as to what they want and how they want it.
Yeah, another thing we've talked about is kind of like a blog type thing, in the sense that we want a format that it's easier for us to keep tabs on how people are interacting with it and asking questions. So it's easier for us to address the questions versus like when Bryan puts something out on a Facebook post and there's all sorts of comments. Finding the good question comments in there and trying to like stay on top of all that, it's a big deal. So adding that functionality into it as well, so that our subscriber base, we can tend to their questions and support better.
You should have Prentice Wink spamming your comments section while you're trying to spam through while you're live. That's when it gets real, Mitch. That's when you have 500 comments from Prentice and 10 people that have honest questions and you're trying to find them.
Takes all types.
Y'all should do like open office hours with a rocket scientist, like call it like rocket scientist open office, like in college when they had
open door hours.
Yep.
Where you could go and ask all the dumb questions that you really didn't want to ask in front of the whole class, but they're real specific to you, because I know like a lot of people with reloading have really specific questions, like when I load I find XYZ.
Yep.
And I bet money if you had like open office hours where it was like an hour that was open where anybody could come ask and there's no dumb questions, like y'all would have a ton of people.
Yeah. So John Wade already said that would be awesome. And I might have already been talking to Amanda and making that as a suggestion for part of phase 2. if there was like an open office hours, an interactive Zoom chat, because if you look at some of these questions that we've had on this show, like there's people that have legitimate questions for you guys, and you know, there's probably nobody else in the world more qualified to answer them than y'all. So I think that that would be like a great.
Well, I think
a great
especially
addition
when
to it.
people are just starting and they don't know what they don't know, right? And so they're
Yep.
like, well, I'm having this bad outcome and I don't know what is causing it. And to be able to like, for 5 minutes, be like, this is what I do when I'm doing my load development, and have one of y'all go, oh, well, step 3, you really shouldn't be doing that. You really should do this instead. And you would like completely alter that person's entire shooting experience, because there's nothing worse than having a year of fighting a caliber and you can't ever get it right, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That was the interaction is a big part of it, and we are hoping that because it's subscription based and it's going to somewhat filter and limit the interaction that goes on to the more serious users. You know, like Mitch said, we can't, as it is on Facebook, we can't really get to all of the questions. But I like that. I think that having that interactive side of it is going to be good. We should do that. See, we got our first piece of feedback. We'll do it.
Yep.
And Jose said, is there a cost for the Zoom classes?
It would be included in whatever. So right now the subscription is $10 a month for access to what we have now. As we build things in there, like I said, we're going to figure it out as we go and use feedback to sort of guide us. But, you know, eventually there's going to be a whole lot more content, and it may be a premium tier, you know, access to Zoom might cost more, but nothing is going to be a per session basis. It'll be different levels of monthly subscriptions.
So premier level membership would be like rocket scientists in my pocket.
I might use different wording.
Yeah.
Bryan's like, wait a minute, I'm not okay with this.
Let's say how much is Bryan and Mitch's cell phone numbers with a guaranteed 1 hour reply per month?
I would never do
lot.
that.
I'm at the range and this happened. Help.
Yeah,
Never do that to them.
there
more
is a
live?
price tag, but
I don't think I can afford
it's
that.
not. I'll say, what do they say? Market price.
Yeah.
That's right.
gotta
If you have
beat-
to
you gotta
ask,
beat-
it's too much.
Right, you got to beat the next highest bidder.
Greg, are there more lives?
There is. Phil asks, will a pick rail 20 MOA versus 40 MOA affect the accuracy of the Kestrel downrange at distance?
No, that's
Nope.
a common question, but it doesn't really figure in as far as ballistics go. All that's doing is putting your scope at an angle so that you're zeroed at the bottom of your elevation's adjustment range. And as long as you measure your sight height correctly, it doesn't affect the flight of your bullet or the geometry that matters.
Yep.
Hey, and a word to the wise. What is that little pocket thing that a bunch of people have? It's military something. Oh, you know what I'm talking about?
The
little
whiz
off-white
wheel?
card? Yeah, don't measure your sight height off of that. There was somebody one day trying to measure it, and I was looking, I was like, that ain't really an inch.
No, that's
It's not, and it says under it, not to scale. But he was sure enough over there trying to measure his sight height, and I was like, bro, I don't think that's an inch. I don't think that's right.
Yep. It's not how that works.
So word to the wise, don't use that to measure your scope height if you forgot to measure it before you got to the range.
Oh, what was the, we tried to do it a dumb way once.
That was the dumb way.
No.
There's lots of dumb
We
ways.
tried to do it with a phone app.
Oh,
Because
jeez.
we were like at the range, and it was before that I decided that calipers was something that should go to the range with me every time I go.
Well, iPhones have a ruler in them. Just use that.
Yeah,
It's
it was
not an
off.
app. It's
It was
actually-
it was off a 1/4 inch from the, but yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna quote Ryan Hay here. He just commented, the Kestrel is only as accurate as the data and variables you put into it, which is very, very true. If you try and use a card or a app or something instead of a set of nice calipers to measure your scope height.
That's true of most anything, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly.
That's why my rifles don't hit the targets as much. Like, they're super accurate, and if I put it in a vise, it'll shoot a really tight group. But when I'm holding it, it's garbage.
What else? While he's looking and finding some other ones, what are some upcoming matches that the AB Lab will be at doing the PDMs? Because I know everybody wants to go get one now that they've seen on the show. So
Yeah, the next one we're going to be at is actually this weekend. I believe it's called MKM, or it's at MKM. It's I think it's called, I'm going to get this wrong, Vortex Rampage or something like that. It's Matt Steiner's match in Pennsylvania. We're going to be there on Friday, so only a few days away. So it might be a little late to get signed up and show up for that one, but that's where we're going to be next. And then I think the next one after that is actually the Night Force ELR Steel Challenge. I don't think there's another one in between there. So that's always a fun one. Bryan and I love shooting that match. So that's always on our list every year because we just want to go shoot it ourselves. So we're going to be there. We get a lot of guys. That's a really fun one for us because we can track the shots really far. We get a lot of really good data there. And we get a huge variety of things from, we've had guys with 416s and I think even a 50 cal come through, all the way down to guys shooting, I can't remember if there's many 6mm, but definitely down to 6.5s. It's a really cool match just because of the diversity of equipment. And then after that, I think the next one is the Conquer the Castle match. It's an ELR match in Texas. I believe we're going to be at the Barrel Maker Classic again. We've been hitting that one the last few years. It's a great match. We get to get a lot of PRS guys through at that match. That always has really good turnout. So that, I mean, that takes us through. What's that?
I said it's at a winery.
Oh yeah, it's a great setting for a match.
I'm sure the schedule for the mobile lab, as far as like what venues it's going to be at, is published on our website, on our Facebook page. So if you really want to get to an event that we're at, there is a schedule for it.
Yeah, in case I missed one or whatever, it's definitely, you can find it on our social media. If you kind of go back through the pictures, there's a graphic that has all of it, but for sure it's posted on our website. And if for whatever reason you can't find it, just reach out through our communications channels.
And if you go, you get to hang with Amanda Wheeler.
Mm-hmm. So just so you know, Mitch, you hit everyone perfectly. I might actually be on the website. So if you go to appliedballistics.com /mobile-lab or our services and go to mobile lab, there's a list of all the events they're going to be at for the rest of the year. After the Barrel Maker, it's the King of 0.28 Mile in Minnesota, Gap Grind in Tennessee, Kestrel Fall Classic in Florida, and the Vortex Team Sniper Challenge Championship match in Texas, where not only do you get to hang out with Amanda Wheeler, you also get to hang out with Greg and Jen.
Yep, I think that last one, I'm not sure we're bringing the actual mobile lab to that one. We're going to be there in support, and we're going to do some cool stuff. I don't think that's actually a PDM event, but I could be wrong on that.
With that said, though, if you remember we were talking earlier, if we're there and, on site in day and we've got a table set up, we'll probably be displaying a bunch of devices with our software in them. And that's your chance to come up and figure out if your gun profile is put together right. If you have questions about your fire solution going into the match, like I said, that's where the majority of large magnitude errors is in the user interface, as opposed to like getting the nitty gritty accurate drag model. And so that's kind of what we were talking about when we decided to go to some events this year without the mobile lab. Is like, most of the value is just in working with shooters to make their profiles correct. Maybe we could go without the lab to, one or two of these things. So it's like Mitch said, we'll be there trying to be useful and helpful, but not necessarily with the radar.
Ooh, so I just got an update from Amanda. She said you guys will be doing classes and talks at the Gap Grind this year.
Yes.
Not sure if you guys knew you were doing that or not, but just you will be.
I take one day at a time, man.
Well, and I
Awesome.
don't think I'll actually be at that one, because I have some wedding related activities around that time. But so you won't get me, but you'll get Bryan at that one, I believe.
Awesome. And she
We'll
also
have to
said,
settle for Ryan.
I guess we'll have to deal with that guy. I guess he could do.
I'll wear a fake beard.
I'm about to say, you gonna have a beard?
I know, like, even when I started, like, even knowing the difference between G1 and G7, when you have never done this and you don't know anything, it's like daunting to know what to put in that Kestrel. And I remember asking people, I was like, what do I put, G1 or G7? And I think I asked 10 people and I think I got 10 different answers. And I was like, well, what do they mean? I don't know. Just use G7. I mean, that's what I just got told. I don't know. Just use G7. Like, but I need to understand why, or I'm going to forget and I'm going to accidentally do G1 next time. Like, I need to understand why. So
Yeah,
I think it's
well,
great that y'all are doing classes.
That's kind of the part of it that we've learned, we've recognized over the years that you know, there's a lot of cutting edge stuff that we work on with our research efforts, and you know, trying to like constantly move the boundary further out. But that doesn't do the new shooters any good. You know, new shooters always have the same questions. They always have the same challenges and problems that bite them. And so we can't ignore that, you know, like a system is no stronger than its weakest link. And if your weakest link is you don't yet know the difference between G1 and G7 or how to use it, then we need to have a way of addressing that. You know, we don't just want to be the ballistic snobs only catering to the high end. You know, we want our tools, our information to be relevant and usable by everybody. And that means that's part of the freedom and flexibility that this academy is going to give us. Is, I mean, based on what you just told us, we would go and do a short video like, hey, ever wonder what G1 and G7 means? Here's what you put in the Kestrel. Here's why. Here's how to not screw it up. And then it's up there for everybody. Every new shooter that comes along with that question, hopefully will find that video, and you know, one by one we'll address all those tripping points until we're all talking the same language. We're all, you know, at the same level, or at least have a path to go as far as you want to.
I think that's great. So Robert, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, apparently, since Mitch isn't gonna be there, most, if not all, of the PRS AB ambassadors will be there to help you at the gap grind. So you got backup.
So Robert Brantley says, I'm going to read it word for word because I wish I could read it in Robert.
I'm about to say, please do it in Robert's voice.
Mr. Litz, have you ever seen, I can't do it. I can't do his Southern accent, and I have a Southern accent, but he's more Southern than me. Mr. Litz, have you ever seen the same lot of bullets have drastic BC differences between different rifles with similar twist? Say a G7 that runs .290 to .320.
With the same twist, different barrels with the same twist?
It says similar twist.
Same lot of bullets, different rifles with similar twist.
Well, I guess similar is
I don't know if he's talking like a 1 7.5 versus a 1 8, or.
Yeah, so there's a couple scenarios I can think of that happening, and Mitch, maybe you can think of more. One scenario would be that one barrel is relatively new, and the other one is, you know, has a lot of rounds on it, is really, really rough, and that's where you get into that 2%. You know, we saw 2% over 1,000 rounds of 300 Norma, but you know, if you had a 300 Norma that had 1,500 or 2,000 rounds, we haven't charted that. So you may be able to get a larger percentage difference. Same lot of bullets, barrels of similar twist, but the round count may be the reason why they're different. Another reason, and this is maybe stretching a little bit more, but one way that you can change the BC of a bullet is by shooting it too hard. And what I mean by too hard, especially a lead core bullet, if you got a lead core bullet with a long nose that is unsupported on acceleration in the barrel, the nose of the bullet can slump can deform under acceleration because it's unsupported. You know, you've got 100 grains of lead inside a jacket and you're kicking it in the ass at like thousands of G's, and it's not 100% rigid. And so if you're shooting those bullets at vastly different velocities, like you're exceeding 3,200 feet a second, usually is where these things start to happen. I could see where one gun, if it's shot at a slower nominal speed and the other one's like blistering fast and has a lower average BC, we've seen that, and due to the damage done by shooting it really hard. Maybe that's not it at all. Maybe you're talking the same cartridge. And if you're talking the same cartridge, then it's down to just barrel wear that I can think of.
Well, so when I read that question, the first thing that popped into my mind is a test that we were involved in one time with, I believe it was 10 brand new, I believe they were 300 Win Mag barrels. Could have been 300 normal, but I think they were Win Mag barrels. Brian, you're probably remembering the test I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it was with one lot of ammo, 10 brand new barrels, and we shot all 10 of them. 9 out of the 10 were nearly identical. The 10th one, I'm pretty sure we didn't have an actual explanation for why, but the BC was notably different. Now, I'm not sure if it was as different as the example Robert gave, but it was, you know, on that same order of magnitude where it's like, okay, 9 out of 10 are the same. This 10th one's different. And we can't really explain why in this example. So we have seen that.
Yeah.
It's certainly possible.
It was lower too. I think in cases like that, the outlier is typically lower.
Yes.
Not higher.
Yeah, because there's some sort of damage in the barrel or something that was causing that bullet. Maybe it was just had a rougher finish on it, on the bore, than the other 9, and it had, you know, a lower BC. It's really hard to increase the BC of a bullet beyond what its actual potential is, but it's surprisingly easy to lower it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I got one more live question from Matt. A little bit different. He says he's into heavy paper patch cast bullets in 45-70 government with a muzzle velocity of around 1,300 feet per second. He was fooling around with different lead alloys, which gave slightly different weights. 502 grain versus 504 grain versus 510 grain projectile weights. He put these different weights into the solver, and it reports the same drop at distance at a distance of 1,000 yards. He put in a massive weight change to a 600 grain projectile, and it still gave the same drop. BC and MV is roughly the same. Why is the drop not changing because of the bullet weight?
I've got a good, quick, short answer for that. If you have the same BC and the same velocity, then you're going to effectively get the same number, except for
Kinetic energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what's going on there is in the ballistic solver interface, there are variables that are used to drive the trajectory solution, and there are variables that aren't. The variables that drive the trajectory solution are the BC and the muzzle velocity, like Mitch said. The bullet weight, it technically is part of the BC, but if you've changed your bullet weight, but you don't change the BC, well, your trajectory is getting calculated on the velocity and BC that you input. If you put in like, you know, 100 grain heavier bullet, but leave the BC the same, what you're representing there is a bullet that is heavier, but has a lot more drag, and such that it equals out to the same BC, which isn't at all physically what you're doing. Your bullets are mostly the same. They're just a little bit different in weight. And so in reality, they probably do have different BCs, like, and BC scales with weight very predictably. In the case of your, what were they, 500 grain bullets, on the order of 500 grains?
500 to 600.
Right. So if you're not changing the gross shape of the bullet, if it's got the same nose and tail and, you know, the same basic shape, but you add 5 grains, 5 grains is 1% of 500. And so if you add 5 grains, that should increase your BC 1%. It's a 1-to-1 ratio of mass increase to BC increase if the shape stays the same. And so again, if you're telling it that you put 100 grains on there, 100 on a 500 grain bullet, that your BC should be 20% higher for that bullet, and your muzzle velocity should be somewhat lower because of the heavier bullet. So it's the answer to your question is really about understanding how the inputs are used, and that bullet weight is not used in the trajectory solution. The BC is what's used, BC and muzzle velocity. Now, that's all true when you're running BCs. If you're running CDMs and you change the bullet weight, that will change your trajectory, because the solver doesn't combine them into one number like it does with ballistic coefficients.
That's actually why I hesitated, because right after I said it, I was like fact checking myself, and that's what I was like verifying in my head. I was like, oh yeah, because CDMs, the weight does matter in the interface of the solver. One quick add-on I have to that is, if you want to get a little bit more into the weeds of what Bryan was just talking about, Bryan, on your Bryan Litz Ballistics page, you recently had a post where you kind of broke down how to actually calculate a BC and what the BC number is made of. And it would work really well for this example, because he could take his 502 grain bullet, say he has a known BC for that, and calculate out what his form factor is, and then go to a 600 grain bullet with that form factor and actually calculate the BC, using the actual math for how to do that if you wanted to get more into the weeds. And I won't go into any more detail on that, but that information Bryan posted on his page like less than a week ago. So
Also, quick little plug. I know we've talked about it with the videos. If you don't follow Bryan Litz Ballistics on Facebook or Instagram, you totally should. If if maybe reading an entire small library of books isn't your thing, or a monthly podcast subscription, it's kind of like I've started calling them knowledge nuggets. It's like just a Facebook post that's just like entirely full of like rocket scientist level knowledge there, and really cool videos of shooting cool things really slow.
Yeah, the high speed fruit videos are the best. We've got some more coming. We don't shoot just fruits and vegetables. So there's some more hardware coming up. Hardware impacts.
I totally want to shoot something with the high speed camera. Francis, bring it to a match. But I'm in it, and let me shoot something. I want video of it.
Francis is great with that camera. He's got every setting in there gets tweaked before something is filmed, and it turns out really good.
Next time a piece of technology at work angers me, I'm just going to put it into a FedEx box, show up.
After today, I want to shoot a fly. That fly was this big today,
Yeah.
flying around, that I was trying to kill at work.
you need a
Amanda
bug
said
assault.
just go visit them and you can shoot it.
There were flies all over everything. Like, it was kind of a warm spring day, so they were kind of hatching, and we were blowing up all kinds of sweet stuff, like fruits and vegetables.
Oh, so they were
where do you
everywhere.
Where do you see the pineapple? The pineapple and flies to pineapple juice. Like, the flies were all over everything. We had a chance to shoot flies on a number of those targets, but it was the Easter bunny that we connected on.
Yeah, that's the only one we tried. It's not that we missed flies.
The timing
and other
wasn't right.
things.
The
Exactly.
timing didn't present as well.
Yep.
So were there many fly guts at this?
Dude,
You can
there's
see it in the.
scattered in like a 50-foot radius.
Yep.
But yeah, on the video, if you go frame by frame, like the 2 to 3 frames after the bullet hits the fly, there's a little bit of the chocolate that has got like a red tint to it. That's right where the fly was.
Yep.
Might not eat a chocolate Easter bunny for a while.
Oh, we ate the ears. The ears were intact. Just a little
Is that
sandy.
what the fly was on?
No, the fly was where the
Right.
bullet hit.
Like that thing that you Heimlich maneuver 2 fingers down from or whatever, that part.
Sternum.
Sternum, there we go. Ooh, I got a
think
thing.
you'd go 2 fingers down from.
Will you shoot a primer for me?
That would be a cool one.
Yeah. Yeah. we'll
I've
do
been
that.
literally, I think that there was a post up there about tell us what you want to shoot. And it was like a couple of weeks ago, and I'm a little bit slow. I want you to shoot a primer. I want to see what that looks like.
Okay.
Wear safety glasses.
We have a we have a telephoto lens for that camera, so we're pretty far back. I mean, it's only like 20 yards, but most of the stuff goes out and up. A little bit of it comes back. Some, like when we started shooting glass stuff, some of the glass comes back at us a little bit, but not very fast. We still wear safety glasses if it's glass.
Oh, Brian Sykes has a question.
No bullshit.
Yeah, he said it's no bullshit. It's a legitimate question. What are your thoughts on the 4DOF and its shooting solution capability? Bordoff.
Honest thoughts that solver is, I don't think it's a poorly written solver. I think the interface confuses a lot of shooters. I don't think it's very well supported, and I don't think there's nearly the data that we have in our library. But if you're asking about the solver itself, I mean, if you say, you can test a solver just by running a G7 solution, and there's lots of solvers that if you give them all the same inputs, they'll give you all the same outputs, and that's the hallmark of an accurate solver. Now, everything else around that, how easy is it to screw up? How do you get the accurate inputs to begin with? Like there's a lot of stuff that has to come together to make a holistic, accurate fire solution, and the solver is just one of those parts. And I don't actually find fault with the 4DOF solver. There's other things that prevent that from being a well-rounded product, in my opinion.
There you go.
No bullshit.
No bullshit.
Oops.
So what goals do y'all have for AB? Just real quick, any major goals, anything y'all want to accomplish in the next year?
Well, we talked about that in the beginning about getting into like internal ballistics and terminal. I mean, those are going to be long-term projects, especially these days. Getting equipment these days, like for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Nothing that we need is easy to get to begin with. And in times like this, where even the most basic stuff is seeing delays in the supply chain, it really makes it hard to get some specialized equipment. So things move real slow. But as far as the near term goes, you know, I think we want to keep on top of the economic conditions that are affecting everybody and not make any mistakes with the business that's going to tank us. That's always something that you can't lose sight of. But that, I don't think that's what you meant by that question. So one of the goals, I've got a new idea that's just kind of forming up. I don't know what format it's going to take, but I'm thinking of it as Project Cold Bore. And the idea is to really study systematically cold bore effects. You know, I think there's a whole lot of shooters that can take their precision rifles out and within a few shots start hitting, you know, 10-inch plates at 1,000 yards, for example. But it's those first couple shots that I really want to focus on. You know, it's not just the wind that you have to walk in. Sometimes the first shot's always high. Sometimes the first shot's always slow. Sometimes the first shot's just unpredictable. And you have to warm the gun up and get settled in before you can start shooting a small group. And that's fine. We have a lot of fun doing that. But I am interested in the variables that affect the first shot out of a rifle after you've, you know, it maybe sat for a week or a month or a day, and seeing like how far does your cold bore land from the rest of your group and why, and what you can do to ensure. I mean, imagine it. Imagine if you could, you know, put your gun down and don't touch it for a month, and then take it out and expect the first shot to be exactly on your zero point of aim at 100 yards, which means that you can actually expect to hit targets at long distance on a first shot too. I think that gets glossed over a lot because of sight-in days, and because, well, you always get more than one shot at a target, and once the match starts, you're not really cold bore again until the next day. And so it gets glossed over. but I don't want to gloss over it anymore. I want to understand it. And it's going to, we'll approach it with our, large scale, statistically significant approach. We'll probably have, 5 or 10 guns with batches of ammo that every day we shoot a group of 5 shots and note where, the speed and impact of the first shot in relation to the group, and just keep notes. It's going to be a lot of rigorous note taking and a lot of like, well, what do we do to try to fix this? And so it's a project that'll take a long time, but I'm really excited about what we could learn from it in terms of improving. Because I mean, in some applications, that's everything. In hunting and military applications, law enforcement applications, like the cold bore shot is oftentimes the only one that you have and the only one that matters. And I think there's a lot of mystery around that still, which I'd like to take that on.
I think a lot of PRS matches now do the AccuShots, shots, and that is usually a cold bore shot. They usually do it the second day. So like you've shot, but then your gun has sat all night, all day, sometimes in the freezing cold, depending on where you're at. And then you go out the next morning and your first shot is your AccuShot, which is 100 yards, trying to get as close to, that one small point. So it's kind of fascinating to see the people that have done their homework and know where their cold bore shot goes and can, land it very accurately. So that'll be very interesting to see. Be very cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pay attention to this. I might stand a chance at winning an AccuShot.
Are we good with lives?
We are good with lives.
All right. Well, I think we can wind it down to shout outs then. We usually start with you. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm going to start off with the thing that I'm supposed to say at the middle of the show, which is to remind you guys, if you're watching us live on Facebook, that's a great way to see us. If you miss us, it stays up on Facebook forever. Normally the day after the show, I'll go on and I'll upload it to all the different podcast platforms. So, you might not be able to see my beautiful face, but you can take us with us to work, on your run, on your way into work, whatever. And then eventually, I think you guys worded it the same way. Eventually, everything will end up over on YouTube as well. So make sure to give us a follow over there. There's several different ways to win this or to watch us win this. I was thinking that because I got to remind you, if you're watching, share this post. If you share this live stream, you're entered to win the complete AB media bundle. Awesome value. It's just like 37 pounds of pure information that you can absorb into your brain via osmosis or reading, whatever your preferred method may be. But share the original Facebook live stream around, and that is where we will choose our winner from. And for shout outs real quick, I got GSL suppressors, my nice little thing to make my 22 super quiet. Shooters and Sharpshooters of Augusta, our local indoor and outdoor ranges. PDC Custom, most beautiful rifle chassis known to man. Shooters World Powder, what I use for all my center fires, and I can buy it pretty much anytime at Shooters of Augusta. Hunter's HD Gold, I'm blind, but not when I'm wearing that. And Fix It 6, because I like taking stuff apart and then putting it back together and then taking it back apart and putting it back together and et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. Mitch, you got any shout outs?
Well, probably one of them is the same as Bryan. Obviously, the Science of Accuracy Academy, go check out what that's about. The website's live. Everyone can go see that. And then also shout out to Amanda Wheeler for making things like this happen.
Yeah, we were commenting before the show how she keeps us on schedule.
Yep.
Which is
I almost didn't bring my computer home from work, and she's like, "You're gonna need that later." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a good point. Otherwise, I'd have to do it on the iPad."
Actually, what we said before the show, Amanda, was that Greg and I were saying that like the two greatest people in the industry are Amanda Wheeler and Morgan Joy Twinter from Capstone, because y'all are great PR people and setting up things and keeping things straight. And y'all are both behind the scenes and get no glory, but y'all do amazing jobs. So shout out to them for sure. Bryan, what kind of shout outs you got?
Same ones as Mitch. He knew he'd be taking mine.
Yeah.
I actually have a question though. One of Greg's shout outs, the 100 HD gold, are those glasses like safety glasses that are polarized or something?
They are. So they sell complete regular out of the box, ready to go shooting glasses with like a yellow gold tint to the lenses that really increases the contrast. You can get custom prescription. You can get them in single vision.
You get bifocals.
I don't know about the bifocals, but somebody else tells me you can get them in bifocals. If you got those aging eyes. And what I actually have, I love my Oakley fuel cell sunglasses. Like they fit my face perfect. They wrap in good and tight. They're just perfect for me. So I actually sent a pair of those out to Bryan and had him custom put my prescription Hunter's HD gold lenses in my favorite set of glasses for me.
I think I'm going to do that.
He'll actually, reach out to him. He'll do whatever, like, I talk about how I have bifocals now because I'm getting old, whatever. But looking at the turret, I'm looking through the top of my glasses because I don't want to take my face off the gun. So I'm trying to look up. So I haven't done it yet. I need to get with him, but he said he could do me a prescription lens where my right eye, instead of having the reading part down here, I would have reading part up here. So I could read my turret, but when I come out, I could look through the middle of the glass and not, have that distortion from that. So he'll do where he'll do right lens, one prescription, and left lens, another, if you're in the scope. He'll do whatever. So he's very, shooter oriented, trying to make it work for us. It's very good.
That's good. I didn't know that anyone did that kind of stuff. When I shoot in Wyoming, I wear contacts so that I can wear yellow tinted safety glasses to find the targets better, because that little bit of contrast helps me find the targets in the field. And I don't like wearing contacts in that environment because of the dust. And so like prescription yellow polarized sunglasses, that's my jam.
Yeah,
I'm going to talk to him.
It is you can just go on the website, hit buy now, and get something sent to you real fast and in a hurry. But he is the kind of person that will sit there and talk to you on the phone for as long as you want, figure out exactly what you need, and work with you.
He'll actually make just regular glasses for you too, if you wanted. So, I mean, like that's what he does, is prescription glasses, not just I do shooting glasses and I'll throw a prescription in for you. I mean, he knows what he's doing. So
cool.
All right. And then for me, shout outs. I just want to shout out the two of y'all for coming on the show and spending 2 hours of your Tuesday night with us. We so appreciate it, and dropping some of your rocket science knowledge bombs, because I sit here the whole time like in awe, listening to all the things. I actually am a closet nerd. Not really. I was an outright nerd in high school and everybody knew it. But I love math, and the science of it is just fascinating. So to hear y'all really, explain the science of the bullet and the trajectory and the drag and everything, it's just always been fascinating to me. So thank y'all for going out to the matches and doing the PDMs for everyone, because I know everyone just loves it. Everybody loves it whenever y'all are there. So thank y'all so much for doing that. And with that, that'll be a wrap for episode 374, and we will see y'all next week.
Thank you.